Hi everybody, this is Introduction to Unreal Engine, so let's start with creating a new project. And this is also prepare us for UEFN, and hopefully Creative 2.0 is coming very soon. I will give you some helpful tips on how to work with Unreal and whatnot. So after you're gonna launch the Epic Games Launcher, head down to Unreal Engine and then to Library. Then with the engine versions, hit the plus button and you're gonna be able to install a new version. So 5.1 preview, which is like a preview of the new update of the Unreal that is going to be coming, which can be actually a little bit unstable. So just so you know, I recorded this video initially quite some time ago, and 5.1 already is released as a stable branch, so you can safely just download 5.1 and open a new project in 5.1. But this way I was able to show you how the preview is gonna be looking. And everything with the 4 at the beginning is like the old version of the Unreal, which is still widely used, but it's just like it doesn't really have all those new cool features. So Fortnite underneath is using Unreal Engine 5. We know this because Chapter 4 was released on Unreal Engine 5 and has all those cool features, and UEFN is definitely going to be using the same thing. We already saw that it is using the same UI. Definitely you are interested in 5th version of Unreal. Choose the installation place you would like to install this. It says actually that this is for the testing purposes only. So just be cautious, there might be some kind of bugs or crashes and whatnot. This is a preview, although overall they are quite stable, so I'm not really afraid to be tinkering with this thing that much. But again, as I said, 5.1 is already released, so don't be worried, just install 5.1. So now we're gonna choose where you like to install this thing. It doesn't really matter that much, but what is important is actually the options. And in options, you want to choose a couple of things. Firstly, you probably won't gonna be at the beginning, developing your project or your game for any different device or platform other than Windows. So you can actually untick all those check marks for target platforms. Windows is going to be installed anyway, and it makes your installation way smaller. As you can see, it is a couple of gigs that you're gonna save, which is actually quite important because you're gonna install a couple of versions of Unreal. Suddenly you have like 200, 300 gigs on the disk. And going back to components, we have also a starting content, and this is actually like the starter assets, a couple of materials like a scene level with like the display of the asset that you can actually use and reuse and learn from them. So I highly recommend to use them and to include this package. Also, we have templates and feature packs. I highly recommend getting this because those are actually like the templates that you're gonna start developing from, where Epic already set a couple of basic functionalities, a couple of basic modes of play, and like camera is already set up, controls are set up. So I highly also recommend to use this. And there's like 2 important things for programmers, which is engine source and editor symbols for debugging. And they are mainly used to be able to browse the engine source code. As you probably know, and Unreal Engine source code is open source. You can just freely browse this and actually go to GitHub and even browse down their code for free. And you can also use those symbols in here to be able to debug engine source without having to get the source code from GitHub and boot up the engine this way manually for yourself. You can, of course, if you want to, but you don't have to. You can install the compiled version of engine, which is basically like whole package without having to dig into the code, and just install the editor symbols for debugging, just to be able to debug the engine more easily. So I'm not going to actually install this because I'm going to be only using this as a preview for you guys. But if I'll be coding, I am always installing this thing for me. So you can see it rises quite significantly with every single thing. So just as I said, choose don't install things that you don't really need, and just hit apply. And now the installation is gonna happen. And after the installation and download is ready, we're gonna launch up and boot up new project. If you'd like to browse the engine source code in GitHub, you're gonna have to create a GitHub account because they actually require you to be able to do it for Unreal, and link that GitHub account with your Epic Games account, authorizing it to be able to actually view the code. Follow the links I showed you, and there are very easy instructions on how to do so. If you're not coding, you don't really need this, so just skip it. So after the successful download, just launch the engine, hitting the launch button. And now Unreal Project Browser gonna show up. So here you're gonna have your old projects that you're gonna be able to choose from to run again. Or in your case, you're probably gonna have none of them. So you're gonna have to create a new one. There are 4 categories of those templates that you can choose from. Firstly, the games, of course. And there's a couple of templates that are already made by Epic for you. We're gonna choose the 3rd person, as it reminds me of a Fortnite the most. And now you have the option to run already C++ project or Blueprint. So now it doesn't really matter that much, to be honest with you. Simply going with the blueprints, you can always add C++ source for your project at any time. It doesn't really make takes that much. It just it's the option to have them already. Also, there's this target platform, so you probably of course want to choose desktop. Quality percent, just leave it as it is. It is just not important for right now. And you want to include starter content, I think, because just as I said, there's a lot of stuff that you can already use, a few materials and assets and whatnot that you can play with and learn from, so just leave it. Ray tracing, you can leave it however you want to. You can always turn this later on, so it doesn't really matter. And let's just give a name for our project. I'm gonna call it UVG8 because that's my naming convention, I'll say. And now you want to choose a folder, and I have also prepared the folder for myself. I have UVG8 in here, and as you're gonna see, there's 3 folders for me in here already, but you won't gonna have them. I have a plastic because I'm using plastic STM as my version control, and I highly recommend because it's really good solution, and I think it's free. There's also an asset, and in here, this folder, I usually actually keep the source assets. So if you're gonna have like the source assets for like your Blender files or 3D model source files or like Photoshop files .psd, I'm keeping them in separate, in the assets, because whenever I like to package the project separately, I can actually just send only the project without the sources and the game. And in game folder, I'm actually keeping all the game files and actually the Unreal project. So I select the game and hit create. Shaders compilation gonna take a while, but don't despair. Just subscribe to my channel, check my Discord, and read my Twitter. Meanwhile, running Unreal first time might take quite a while because Unreal is in background building and compiling shaders, and shaders are like instructions that tell the GPU how to draw object based on its materials and other properties defined in Unreal. But after it's done, we can see Unreal Editor finally. Let me now briefly explain what is Unreal composed of. What we're looking at is a little bit more of a default setup of Unreal with the scene in the main viewport of the editor. Is your main window to the project place and where you edit your maps to your levels. Then content drawer, if you don't see it, just click the button on the left bottom. You can also use Control spacebar shortcut to summon the content drawer very quickly, which is your place to get your all assets contained in a project or in plugins or in engine sources. And I'm gonna show you later on how to access all those things, how to show other things that you don't maybe see. In the right down corner, you're gonna see shortcuts that I'm going to be pressing. And here, just like in Windows, you just browse folders, browse for assets. And for example, we can go to all, content, third person, maps, third person map, and this is the map that we actually have currently loaded. On the top left, just next to the Unreal logo, you can see third person map with the map level icon, and this means that the currently loaded map to the main window of the editor is this map, third person map. You can double click on the map asset and you're gonna see that it loads exactly the same map. And don't worry if you're gonna get at the beginning some kind of messages, logs, some kind of warnings, just dismiss them for now or close the message log window. We're gonna deal with this later on. In viewport, you can move with the right mouse button to rotate the camera around, and WASD and also arrow keys to be flying around. So you can fly around your map just kind of like in creative mode, but character does not obscure your view, which is just awesome. Also, by holding right mouse button and hitting E and Q keys, you can go up and down in Z axis. And you can speed up moving of the camera, the speed of the camera with the scroll wheel. If you want finer control or you're on a laptop, you can use the button on the top right corner of a viewport, this camera icon. We're gonna come back to the viewport later on, but let's look for the other things around. So on the right, you're gonna see outliner. And if you don't see the outliner, just go to the window, outliner, and choose one. You can actually have few of them open, which is just awesome. That's a new addition from 5.1 because for the longest time, we could have only one. Editor is also composed of windows, so you can dock it wherever you want to. I suggest to talk it to the right, just as I have. Outliner is a list of items that are present on a scene. You can browse and go to every single item that is on the level, and by hitting F key you can move your camera to the selected actor. Back in viewport, to rotate around some kind of actor, hold left alt and left mouse button, and you're gonna be able to rotate easily around the actor. Now when you're gonna scroll out and in with your mouse wheel, you will scroll towards this actor, which is very handy. And you can also do it by holding right mouse button and left alt key. So back to outliner, it is divided by folders. You can create folders just to nest things together and have them a little bit more organized. So for example, player start, which is actually the place from where player starts the game. This is one of the selectable actors because everything that you put on a level is an actor. That's long-standing convention of our Unreal. So what are actors? In short, actors is a type of asset, the only one that is actually placeable on a level. And actors are composed of components, and we're gonna see later on how those components define the actor of specific type. But for example, when you're gonna look onto your outliner, the type column gonna show you what type of actor this specific actor on the level is. So our cubes and those meshes that you see on level, those blocks, are of type static mesh actor. This means that this actor is probably composed of some kind of static mesh component, defining that this actor uses some kind of mesh. But let's move on. We're gonna see how actors and components work together later on. What is important right now just to remember that every single object on a level that you can place on the level is an actor, which is composed of some kind of components. And you can see the number of actors in here on the left bottom corner, and also the third person map name in here, and you can collapse this map because you can have actually multiple maps nested. But we're gonna go into this later on. Just let's go through the details panel. After selecting some kind of actor, details panel should populate with data relating to this actor, and in here it is your main information about this particular instance of actor on a scene. What are his exposed details, because some might be hidden, but the ones that you can edit or at least view are going to be displayed in here. So every actor, we're gonna have some generic basic categories like transform or maybe object and whatnot, but there's going to be many different categories per different type of actor, because as I said, you extend the actor and create different kind of actor types to make different type of actors, of course. If you don't see the details panel, again go to the window and to the details, and you can have few of them. After some basics, I would like to play the game and run around my level. So let's hit the big green play button, and you can also hit the Alt P keyboard shortcut to do the same thing. And in the main viewport, the game gonna start if everything works correctly. So as you remember, we started with the third person map template. Because of this, we're able to steer this character, move the camera around, see the environment around, and interact with the environment, because this is all what Epic actually prepared in the template. This is why actually I told you guys to download and use the templates, because already a couple of the things are going to be set up for you. So in here we can run with WASD, move the camera with your mouse, and jump with the space. Those blue cubes have actually physics. You can kick them around, move them around, just play with this thing. After you're done playing, just hit the escape button or use the combination of Alt Tab, which is gonna make you lose focus of the viewport window and allow you to use the mouse again. And then with the mouse, stop simulation this big red square. So as you can see, we have at least two ways to interact with our levels and our projects. And this is firstly by editing the level in this main viewport of the Unreal, but also by playing the level, as we have done already by hitting this big play button. And whatever you do in edit mode, in editor, and then is saved, becomes permanently part of the level, of what you've created and saved to the level. And you can save edited level with shortcut Ctrl S, or going File, Save Current Level. But whatever you do while playing is only affecting the gameplay. It is non-destructible, and when you're gonna finish the playing, the session ends and map goes back to the point from where you started playing. So just like in Creative, you're editing your island, so in here level, and this is permanently saved to the level. And in Creative, you're playing the map, here you're playing the level. Whenever you mess up your windows in editor too much, you can always go to default layout of Unreal Engine. Just go to the window and load layout. You can use the default editor layout, which is the one that you started with. Okay, so we have some basics. So let's go back into viewport to add some changes to the level and see how you can manipulate the scene, the actors, the assets to make the scene more interesting. So in viewport, select the floor by left clicking on it and hit F key to center the view. You can also go to the outliner and search for SM_cube and again hit the F key to focus on it. Now move your camera a little bit to the left and you're gonna see the gizmo, those three arrows, the green, red and blue arrow, which is your gizmo, and the gizmo is the handle to manipulate your object on a scene. Most transformations that you're gonna do in Unreal are gonna actually happen around the gizmo, at least the ones that you're gonna do by hand. So there are a couple of different types of gizmo. This one is for the location transform, and this is why in the details panel you're gonna see in a transform category location, rotation and scale, because you're gonna have three different gizmos for every single one of them. And now this arrows is for location. So with the selected object, gizmo indicates where the pivot of the object is. And we know what the pivots are from Creative, right? The pivot is the place from which the transformation happens for the object, and it is quite important to pay attention to where the pivot is located, because when scaling or rotating the object, the pivot gonna decide how the object is gonna be scaled or rotated. So depending on where the gizmo is located, you're gonna have to pay attention to this. The transformation is gonna happen. So the gizmo is the exact location of the actor on the map, right? So under transform and location, you're looking at where the gizmo is located in the world. So this actor's gizmo, this SM_cube, his gizmo is actually not located in the center of the mesh, but in a corner of a mesh. But let's quickly take a look at the actor called SM_chamfer cube. Those are those blue cubes that have physics turned on. Select one from outliner and then hit F key or just move your camera to the one. And you're suddenly gonna see that the gizmo is directly in the center of the mesh. So if you're gonna hold gizmo arrows and move the mesh, you're actually moving the mesh around this gizmo. So if you're gonna change your tool to rotating objects, hitting E or choosing those two circular arrows, the rotation of the object is gonna also happen around this gizmo. So you're gonna hold this red quarter of a circle and just drag it with the left mouse button. You're gonna see that the rotation happens around the gizmo. The same is with every single axis. So you have to gonna pay attention to the gizmo. Let's go back to the SM_cube, and you're gonna see that if we're about to rotate this mesh, it rotates around the corner of the mesh because there is where the gizmo is located. But before we're gonna move the floor piece, we're gonna duplicate this by hitting Ctrl D keyboard shortcut, or right clicking on the floor and selecting Edit and Duplicate. You can also do this in the outliner. It might seem that nothing happened, but if you're gonna look at the amount of actors, it increased, and SM_cube 14 was created. It will become selected automatically, so now we can move it to a new place to make another room. If you're gonna look carefully into the left corner of the viewport, you're gonna see also 3 symbols and 3 lines representing Z, X, and Y coordinates of the scene. So moving your camera around, you can see how the coordinates changed, and you can by this judge into which direction you're kind of looking. And colors on the gizmo represent the same thing. It's blue for Z, which Unreal's convention means up and down, green for Y, left and right, and red for X axis. So front and back, and consequently positive X is forward. So now I'm gonna move my camera a little bit with Alt and left mouse button being held, and zoom in with the mouse scroll wheel. Or you can also do it by holding left Alt and right mouse button. You can zoom it this way. And I'm going to frame this gizmo and the corner of this mesh. And now by holding the gizmo on the red arrow, which means X axis, I am going to move this mesh a little bit. And notice how the movement of the mesh isn't smooth. It kind of, jumps from place to place, just being like snapped. And this is because we have the grid snapping turned on. And you can see this by hovering this button, which is highlighted, this grid icon. It says that we have grid snapping enabled, and we have enabled this to snap size of 10. So you have to know that Unreal uses centimeters as the units of measure. And because of this, objects being moved are gonna be snapped by 10 centimeters. Each 10 centimeters, we're gonna snap the object to the grid. And of course, you can modify the distance of snapping or turn the snapping off by pressing this button, this grid. So let's do it. And now notice how the movement is very smooth, which gives you finer control of how do you want to place the mesh. But with all those changes, let's just delete this mesh actually by hitting delete key. And the reason is I want to show you how snapping works when you duplicate the object. So let's now, with the snapping turned off, so this grid is going to not be highlighted in blue, duplicate the object again. So select the SM_cube and hit Ctrl D or duplicate it from outliner. And notice that in the details panel, the transform location is in exact 0 in both Y and X, in both red X and Y green value. You can confirm that this is the same by clicking again on SM_cube and seeing that actually their transforms are exactly the same. So now again, delete the SM_cube 14 and select SM_cube and duplicate it again. But now we have in the grid snap selected being highlighted by clicking on this grid and by setting the grid snap value to 10, let's say, and duplicate this by hitting Ctrl D, and you're gonna see suddenly that the location in the transform in the details panel, the transform now is 10 in X and Y for this newly duplicated cube. And this is how snapping works. When you duplicate objects, they automatically snap to the grid when you have the grid selected, and we don't really want this. So I'm gonna show you how to quickly correct this thing. In the details panel, in location transform, X and Y, just zero it by typing 0 and hitting enter for both X and Y. And now you see that we have back again the cube in a position 0, 0. And 0, 0, 0 positions, so the origin of the map, the center of the map is very important, as because, you know, it is the center of the map. Allows easy to locate yourself if you're ever lost. Just go into the 0, 0 position, just drop an asset or something like this into 0, 0, and you're gonna kind of know where you are. But you probably also noticed that the SM_cube, this original cube, the floor, has -50 on the z-axis. And this is because we actually have this cube being scaled. So let's inspect this cube a little bit more and see what is it composed of. So going into the details panel, in the category of general, under the static mesh, there is a static mesh, this cube with this blue line in the picture called SM cube. We can double click this and we're gonna open static mesh editor. So this object from a scene is a static mesh, which is composed of this asset, this 3D model, as you can see in here. And without going too much into the details, let's look on the left top side of this viewport window, where we see this cube, and there is under those names and informations about this cube, there is approx size, and it's 100 by 100 by 100. So it's a 1 meter cube basically. So knowing that, let's close this static mesh editor by just hitting the X, and back on the scene, let's look at our cube SM_cube 14 or SM_cube, our floor. So you're gonna see that it is actually being scaled. On the scale transform, you're gonna see that we have on the X30, on the Y35, and on the Z 0.5. And now this means that this cube from this original scale of 100 centimeters, 1 meter diameter, it was actually scaled to make it so big. So this is why actually this floor is as big as we can see. Now knowing that the Z scale of this cube is 100 centimeters and it was scaled by 0.5, scale works basically as multiplier. So when you're gonna scale the cube or any other object by a fraction of a whole number, you're just basically gonna scale it down. But of course the whole number is just gonna scale it up. So let's move this floor piece just to make it a little bit more visible in y-axis, and now hit R, which is shortcut for manipulating the scale of the object. And you can also select this arrow, that, you know, the last tool from the tool set. And this first tool set, this first tool, the arrow, is just, you know, for selecting the objects. It doesn't really give you any gizmo. So you can actually quickly change the tool by hitting Q, W, E, R. And with scaling tool selected, let's drag the blue cube up and just notice how the floor firstly is growing up and secondly it is snapping. As I said, it is growing up because we are making transformation around the gizmo always, and because the gizmo is on the bottom of the mesh, we are growing it up because the transformation is gonna go away from the gizmo basically. So if you actually drag the blue axis down, it will grow down from the gizmo. So now going back to the SM chamfer cube, just focus on it and now scale it in Z. You're gonna see that it grows in both directions, positively and negatively. So before, with the gizmo on the bottom of the mesh, when dragging the scale tool, it basically made the object scale only in one direction, but here it is growing both directions, which is sometimes what you don't need, right? So pay attention for gizmo, that's very important. Back at SM_cube, our floor, if you've made some kind of changes that you don't want, you can always go back with Ctrl Z, or by going to menus, edit, and undo, move elements. There is also undo history that you can look what you've done and just choose what you want to. And for all you folks waiting for this feature, here it is. Undo button with the history and a redo button. Finally, for all those creators who were complaining about this thing, this is just amazing, and this is just the beginning. So guys, just learn Unreal, and UEFN is going to be such an improvement over the creating workflow. So I'm gonna go back into where floor was originally in a position, but I would like to actually move it somewhere else. And I can better visualize what I'm doing from a top view. So you probably notice in the left top of a viewport, there's a couple of icons, and what interests us is this perspective. And when you're gonna click it, you have ability to choose which kind of view you're gonna get, from top to bottom, left, right, front, back, and also perspective. And now you're seeing objects in perspective, right? They are not flat, and you see basically 3D scene, but you can select a top view with Alt J, and with SM Cube selected, hit F just to locate yourself, and you're gonna see your scene from the top. And don't worry, this look that you're gonna see is a wireframe. It automatically turns you into wireframe when you make these changes to orthographic views. But to see the scene as you saw it before, just hit the button next to those scene view and hold this drop down menu. Is basically a view mode control, which controls what kind of things you see and in which way they are going to be displayed in a given viewport. View mode contains many options, but we're gonna focus on 3 most important ones for now, which is a lit, which is your typical lit scene, lit with a light. So objects are going to be casting shadows. You're gonna see visible sun rays and whatnot. Unlit, which shows objects without the light, but this is very handy if you don't really have a light and you would like to see your objects, because you're going to be able to see the mesh and the textures but without the lighting. And the wireframe, and the wireframe is what you actually might be looking right now, in which the mesh of the 3D object of the 3D mesh is going to be seen as pass through. So you're gonna be able to see all the vertices and lines composing the object. So just change to the lit view mode, and this is the default view mode that you were seeing the scene up to this point. If you're gonna see some kind of strange artifacts like your scene contains the sky dome, blah blah blah, don't worry, this is just a debug thing that you might see, and you can very easily turn this out by just choosing the unlit, which is gonna hide those pesky debug things obscuring your view. So as I said, you're looking top down on your scene. So with the floor selected, locate the gizmo again and zoom in a little bit. And there's a couple of actors that actually are going to be annoying a little bit, and you can hide any actor you like to by selecting those actors. So select those widgets, those icons that you can see just under the gizmo, and hit H. It is to hide the actor. You can also hide the actor in the outliner when you're gonna find the actor in a column where this visibility eye is. You can click the eye just to hide the actor. The one actor you don't want to hide is the directional light. You can move it somewhere else, just move it so it won't obscure your view, because if you're gonna hide it in lit mode, which basically shows all the lights on your mesh, you won't gonna see anything. It is going to be basically a black mesh, because there is no light, right? Nothing shines on the mesh just to make it visible. But if you don't want to mess with the light, you can just, as I said, turn on the unlit view mode. And by the way, as you can see, there are also a shortcut, so Alt 4, Alt 3, Alt 2 to move to the different view mode. So with having the floor selected, now we like to move it to the left. So this is going to be going x-axis negative, so the right arrow. And let's just snap this. And now we know that the cube has 100 centimeters in diameter. We know where the gizmo is, and we know that we like to move it to the left by its size. Knowing, the diameter, we can just calculate how many times we're gonna have to move it to the left. And because it is 100 centimeters in diameter, which is being scaled by 30, it means that we basically, multiply 100 centimeters by 30, which gives you 3000. And now with snapping grid selected, change the snap size to 1000, and we are going to move this to the left 3 times, right? 1, 2, 3 by holding this arrow. We just click somewhere on a location beside any other mesh to deselect it. And you're gonna see that we're perfectly aligned the floor with the rest of the location. And we can go back to the perspective mode by again hitting Alt G. And now look at your floor and turn on other lights again. Just go back into the outliner and hit the eyes just to see everything that you've hidden. And you can show quickly all actors that were hidden by the shortcut Ctrl H, or just clicking on any object or anywhere in the scene, bringing the asset options, and with actor options, visibility, show all actors. And also this menu is for showing and hiding stuff. And you're gonna see quickly that you have aligned your floor perfectly because you were working with grid snapping, correct sizes, you measured how much you're gonna have to move it, so that's perfect. Okay, that was very basic, so let's speed up the modification of this level a little bit. Now select third person template, this text render actor that you're gonna see on the wall just above the floor that we extended, and just delete this, we don't really need it. And then go ahead and select the wall itself, which is called SM_cube5. Go to the top view again, and we're gonna rotate this just to make a wall. So hit the E key, which is the rotate tool, and by choosing rotation, rotate this object. Notice you probably now know where the gizmo is. Gizmo is in one of the corners. Go back into the perspective mode, and you're gonna see that we have this wall rotated, or it is a little bit too long, but don't worry, we don't really care about this too much. You can fix this later on. So now we'd like to actually duplicate this wall to the other side, just to make this room a little bit bigger. So remember to turn off the grid snap and hit Ctrl D. Now turn the snapping on back again with the 50 as snapping grid value, and while dragging along the y-axis, the green arrow, hold the shift button, and you're gonna see the camera is actually moving with the moving mesh, and just position this mesh as a second wall, and voila, we have it. Now we're gonna do the last wall that we're missing, and you can do it wherever. You can rotate some wall, or just, you know, drag the other one that is on the other side. I'm going to actually do so. So I'm gonna go and select this wall, go into perspective mode, top view, and, you know, make my snapping, the grid snap, to the 1000. And suddenly you're gonna see whenever you're actually changing the grid size, snapping, the grid itself, it is changing its size. And you can actually hide the grid in the show just to see how it is changing, going to the show button and to the grid. And suddenly you are without the grid. By seeing the grid, you're gonna see where your objects are gonna snap, and the grid is also visible in the perspective mode. So go hit Alt and G to go back into the perspective mode, fly closer to the 0, 0 location, and you're gonna see that the grid lies on the 0 height on the Z-axis, extends infinitely, and also gives you information about how the snapping is gonna be working. So I'm gonna go back into the top orthographic view, and we have in the SM_cube6, select, hit Ctrl D without grid snapping, turn the grid snapping again, and just drag this wall along the X-axis into the negative direction, into the left. And this wall snapped, but it snapped outside of my floor. So I can make my snapping smaller, see how the grid is gonna adjust. And with the grid adjusted with snapping of size of 50, I am able to fine grain adjust the wall. Going back to the perspective, this wall looks perfect. So I'll actually add the door in here, and I'm gonna show you how to bring new meshes into this map. There are a few ways to add new meshes, new assets to your map. So first, let's quickly see how you can add some basic shapes. And here, next to the selection mode on a bar with buttons, you have quickly add to the project this button, where you can import some content, open marketplace, open content browser, which we're gonna go later on into. But here we can add some basic shapes like actor, character, pawn, light shapes like cube, sphere, cylinder, volume, visual effects, and, you know, there are all the classes that you can actually add to the level. But what interests you are two things for at least right now. We are going to click the bottom one, which is actually place actors panel, and this is gonna give you this panel where you can choose and see the icons a little bit bigger. You can also go by categories and, you know, see the recently placed objects. But for now, just select sphere. So we're gonna drag the sphere into the scene, somewhere into the location, and suddenly you're gonna see that the sphere is gonna be snapping itself to the floor in a kind of strange way, because the sphere is actually being snapped at the gizmo position instead of being like stick to the floor bottom part of it, basically. And this is because, as I said, gizmo is very important, and this mesh have been stick to the floor with the gizmo, and we can actually verify this very quickly. We're going to do so utilizing layouts. So click those three lines button in the left top corner of your viewport, and this menu contains few viewport options you can change to adjust how you're going to see your scene in the viewport. But for now, go way down to the layouts, and in here you might be familiar with this from like the 3D modeling packages like Blender or other applications, where you can have the viewport being split into few windows. So select, for example, free panes, and you have have your perspective view, top-down view, and a right view in a viewport being split separately. So let's now verify our sphere by selecting the floor, going into the right view, let's say, F, zooming in just somewhere close so that we are going to be looking also at our sphere, and you can see the sphere mesh, and you see the yellow line, which is the top and bottom lines of the mesh, but at the same time, when you're gonna select the sphere, you're gonna see that the gizmo, the center of the gizmo and the center of the sphere, because of how it is actually being made, is located at where this yellow line was, the top yellow line was, right? So the sphere did stick with the gizmo to the top face of this mesh basic. So let's go back into the perspective mode, and seeing the sphere, let's drag it up, right? Now there is the snapping. Let's turn off snapping for now, the grid snapping, and let's just move the sphere up and down. And well, I love to place the sphere exactly on the floor. So how am I able to do so? When you're gonna hit end, the mesh is going to be sticking with the face at most closest to the mesh below, right? So we can lift up a little bit of the cubes and whatnot, and you can play with this thing and hit end, and it always gonna land on the mesh below. So that's handy. So now let's move our camera to where we actually have placed the last wall, and we're going to modify this a little bit. Select the wall, hit R for scaling. Remember, where the gizmo is, this is going to be scaled. Now the scaling also have a snapping, and you can turn this on and off. So when being turned on, when you're gonna scale, it is going to scale by the amount specified by the scaling option, right? So it's gonna scale by 0.25 when you're gonna be scaling. You can turn this on or off, right? It doesn't really matter. Just scale this a little bit on the x-axis, so the red one, and go to this hole that you actually just made. And now we're going to add another type of asset, which is static mesh, but from our content drawer. Hit Control Space, and of course in content drawer you can search for assets. So click on the left side on all folder, and then in a search all, type door, and you're gonna find quickly that there are a couple of types of doors that you can choose to put on your location. And what we're interested in are SM_door frame, and we are going to left drag it and drag it into the location. And suddenly when you're gonna move those doors around while dragging it, you're gonna see that they are sticking on the mesh, and this is because the gizmo is located in the bottom of this door. So drag it and put it on the floor somewhere, and we're gonna adjust the position of this door just to make this door nicely being located hugged by the wall. So select the wall again, hit R just to scale this thing, and unfortunately we're gonna have to move our camera a little bit more, but we can just move this a little bit to where the doors are. Turn off scale snapping just to make this precise, and voila, we don't really have any holes in here. And lastly, let's add a cube and seal this just above the door. So let's now from the place actors palette select the cube, hold the cube and drag it onto the wall or onto the doors, so that the cube is going to place above the doors, and move it a little bit to the middle above the doors, then extend it on the y-axis and move it into the middle just between those assets, and then move it on the z-axis so that it's going to be extended, covering doors. There's not going to be holes in there. And don't worry about the material, we're gonna fix it later on. But you can see we have sealed our room, right? And there's another way of snapping which is very handy. It's going to be just lifesaver, knowing how hard it was in Fortnite Creative to snap objects together, to put them edge to edge very close, so there's not going to be holes down there, right? And I mean, without the grid snapping, when the objects were removed out of the grid, it was just impossible. Here it is super easy. So here is vertex snapping and pivot offset. So now move our cube so there are going to be visible hole in between the cube and the wall. And now try to center the camera so that you're going to see the corner of this cube. Now go back into the details panel of this actor to the general category and find static mesh. Click 2 times on the static mesh cube, and you're gonna see the static mesh asset editor. And in here you see our cube. You can hold Alt left key and mouse button to rotate around the cube, but we're gonna go into the show and show vertices, and suddenly you're gonna see those kind of funny cubes, right, that are scattered around our mesh. Now go into the view mode and show the wireframe, and there's a lot of points actually in here. You see the mesh of this cube, but there's actually a little bit of things obscuring our view also. It seems there's like more meshes around. There are. So let's just quickly hide them so it's going to be easier to be viewed in this window of static mesh editor, go to window and preview scene settings, and here you can go into the environment and show the floor. You can turn this off, and also you can go into the show in the main viewport of this window and grid and turn the grid off. So all the things that you know already. And now you can see here's our cube in a wireframe with, as you remember, we shown the vertices in here showing where they are. So basically vertices are like a points in space where the edges of the mesh are meeting together. And because this mesh is a cube which has a little bit more edges than just basically only the outsides of the mesh, the bounds of the mesh, there are also some kind of points on top of the faces. Those are the points that we're going to be using to snap our mesh. And remember, the other mesh is also made of vertices, and you can use any vertices from meshes to connect them together when you're using vertex snapping. You can actually confirm this by selecting the wall and seeing SM_cube. And this is not the same mesh exactly, but it's very close to what we have done there. So we can actually do the same thing, show vertices. This one is actually a little bit simpler because there are only vertices describing the real bounds of the mesh, but still the point is that there are some vertices that you can actually use to snap two objects together. So let's close this static mesh editor and let's go back to the location. So now select our cube. Now move your camera just like me, so you're going to see the vertices, points where three edges are meeting our mesh, our cube, and also our wall, and try to point your cursor just on the corner, the closest corner of this mesh, of this cube. Right click with your mouse and go to pivot and set pivot offset here. What it does is sets the pivot into the location that you've clicked. It doesn't even have to be on this mesh. It can be anywhere in a space, which actually gives you a lot of freedom to modify and use the gizmo creatively, to like rotate a mesh around the gizmo in some kind of different way than it would be originally and whatnot. But this is very, very handy. But we're going to use it kind of differently. We're going to drag the green arrow and hit the V key, which goes for vertex snapping. And as you get closer to your wall, you're suddenly gonna see those blue dots. They are very, hard to see, but if you're gonna look closely, you're gonna see that there are those blue dots appearing at the vertices of this wall, right? You remember we saw those vertices in static mesh editor. So what it does snap our vertices from our cube to the vertices of this wall. So let's snap them so the mesh are going to be sticking with the edges in a y-axis, this green axis, and also let's drag it up on a z-axis, and suddenly you're gonna see when those meshes are going to be connected that the connection is just super accurate, right? Two vertices from two meshes from the wall and from our cube that get snapped together, which is super handy. And all you folks working on a creative mode, you're going to freaking love this because I am using this like so much. It is so helpful. And this is very simple mesh. Imagine something that's a little bit more complex. You can use every single vertices just to stick together meshes. So yeah. And now you're gonna see, you can confirm this by going into the wireframe view mode, and you can select both or either our cube or either our wall, and you're gonna see that they are almost seamlessly like blended together, connected together by vertices. So this is super handy, and I really do believe we're going to actually get this in UEFN for sure, because Unreal comes with this standard, right? And there's like no sense just to cut this off. So yeah, for sure it's gonna be down there. If you didn't choose the template to start your project with, you can always add it later. Just go into the content drawer, hit the big plus add button, and choose add feature or content pack. And here you can choose starter templates that you saw that are going to be added as a folder into your assets in a project, and you can also choose the content and add the starter content. That is going to be handy when you're gonna be editing levels and play with materials, because it comes with some fun materials and particles and some examples of content being used in Unreal. And if you want to add it to the project, just hit the add to the project, and you're gonna locate this thing in your content drawer. So now with all those changes, what is left to be done is to save our level. So let's go into File, Save Current Level, or we can also go into File, Save All, and this is gonna save every single asset that we touched and was modified. Or we can go into the content drawer and click the button save all, and this way our level is gonna be saved. So whenever we're gonna play again our level, we're gonna play from the moment from the last save, right? So now if we're gonna hit play, you're gonna suddenly see that our level has some sphere if you haven't deleted the sphere, and we have the doors in here, which we're gonna play with later on with another tutorial, because as you can see, we can, you know, go through them and probably fall to our death. So this is not what we really want, so we're gonna fix this later on. So I've shown you some basic tools of Unreal, which you might find really useful in UEFN, and I believe all of them are going to be found in UEFN. And I see you in the next tutorial where I'm gonna show you more tools, possibly in UEFN, and we're gonna add the landscapes in here, add materials, and all those fun stuff that is awaiting for us in UEFN. So see you in the next video.